All right, hello again. Welcome to Portfolio 4 once again. My name is Kyle Harvey Havrilesco. I'm just going to run through presentation backgrounds. There's something new that you might be introduced to, something we'll be trying to integrate into your portfolios and get you utilizing with your ArtStation. Presentation backgrounds. Um, this is very key for a couple different reasons here. One reason, having your contact information there, which is very important. We want, as people are looking at your work, as they're seeing Pinterest and they're kind of socially advertising you and socially seeing you, it's nice to have your contact information there for people to further contact you, to find out where you're at. It's also a lot harder to get people or to keep people from ripping your work off as well. If someone takes a screenshot of your work and they try to Photoshop something else back there, it's nice for you to have your name right there just to make it easier or make it harder for them to do it and make it more secure for your work to be up there as well. So that's one reason why we have the dirt in the background, why we have the name there. So a couple of elements we're going to be looking for with the background element. First off, we're going to be making a background color. So it has to be something very neutral, something earth tone maybe, or just desaturated. What we're really looking for though is something that does not distract from the model. Obviously, if your model is like super gray and super desaturated already, you may want to have a little bit of color in the background just to kind of make it easier for you to see the asset. But the priority of your visual should be the model itself and not the contact information or the background or anything like that. So the elements we're working with here are the dirt map background, the vignette, which is the blackened in corners that I showed you with the Sketchfab lecture, a contact banner, which is the background behind your contact information, and then your contact information yourself. Now, you want to write your name in there with a legible font, and you want to make sure you're using a professional email address that's your contact. I understand, that you have your full sale email addresses in Sketchfab, which is, nice to have so you can get that pro account. But if you have your contact information in your background image as a different email address, that then says, okay, if you want to contact me, hit me up on this email address because my full sale email address is right here in Sketchfab, and that's not where you want me to contact. So get yourself a Gmail account, something easy, something professional, um, something that's your name, right? So so this is me just kind of running through this real quick. I will go into Photoshop here in a minute to kind of guide you through this process. Um, Optimized settings for Sketchfab are 1920 by 1080. I have it listed right here in the lecture. Um, you should be able to customize this, so save it as a Photoshop file so you then can customize it should you need to change something. Let's say for instance you move your model around and you need to change where your name is. That would be a great way to just change your name up and re-import it back into Sketchfab. So that's our diagram there. A little explanation of why these things are here. First of all, the vignette as well is very important to kind of create depth in your scene. So that kind of will allow us to focus in on the model with that circular pattern there. It also does a pretty good job of integrating with our ArtStation background, which is black as well by default. So it really does look pretty nice. I'll teach you how to do it here in a minute. But that vignette is really key, and it's really key to have that vignette in your background image and not using Sketchfab so that we're not occluding or covering our contact information or our model in any way. So we'll do that in order there so we get a nice clean visual. So that's the vignette. A dirt map is just a black white image. You may also know it as a grunge map as well, and you can find those for free pretty much anywhere on the internet. Just do a Google search of it, whatever you want to do. Contact information, obviously, you want it to be something legible, something that looks good, maybe even something that has a consistent theme throughout your portfolio. Obviously, you probably don't want to be digging and using different contact information fonts with each of your portfolio pieces, as that might be a little bit confusing, a little weird, just to look at ArtStation in general. So that's there. The contact banner behind your name, just to kind of offset your name from the background, make it look a little bit more legible. Pretty simple stuff there. So apply strategy. Make sure you're using a good idea on what you're doing there. Make sure you're thinking about how you plan on lighting this asset, what kind of mood you want to put on this asset. Um, Making sure that the colors are not going to blend in with the model at some point, and you always have the option to customize that later on down the road. So just keep this Photoshop file with you, and let's run through Photoshop here real quick. So like I said before, the image size we want to be working with is 1920 by 1080, 72 resolution. So if I click on new, and I'll get a screen like this right here. And this is what Sketchfab recommends us to have for our background images. So I'm going to create a new file here. By default, we're going to get white. Okay, just double click that background layer to unlock it. And now we have a blank white canvas. So what I'm going to do now is we need to find a color. So let's run through things. Maybe I'll change it up and do something blue, desaturated. Nice and simple, like a sky blue. Seems fine. Okay, so something like that is good to start off with. Maybe even darker. We can adjust that later on down the road. So I'm going to move on to my next layer, which is going to be my dirt. Okay, and this is something that you'll probably want to find on the internet and take care of yourself here. But let's take a look and see what I have. I'm going to go into some of my files here and just dig something out. I got quite a bit of dirt maps here that I can scroll through. Maybe I want to do something that's more coral, or like, I don't know. Oh, sorry. You want to be using place instead of open. My bad. So place, something interesting to place in there. Kind of scale it up if you need to. Make sure you have a good resolution here. And it should be something like this, just black and white. Get the full resolution in there. Okay, now what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to change the blending node of this layer from normal to multiply, or overlay is another good one too. But for this situation, I think multiply is probably going to work better. I'm going to lower the opacity to something much less drastic. Maybe I'll darken my color up a little bit. Back here. And that way I can kind of lower the opacity of this and get something easier to look at. Okay, now this dirt map here is kind of noisy, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run a noise filter over it, but this noise filter is actually going to be a reduce noise. So if I right click over filter and go to reduce noise, I should have an option there where I can get pretty advanced with things. Right now it's set to basic, but I can get remove JPEG artifacting, have a little bit of strength to it, preserving some details, this type of thing where I'm taking the sharpness of details out. Pretty easy. So doing something like that right there can kind of help reduce how noisy that thing is and how distracting it is. So pretty good there. Maybe I might lower the opacity just a little bit more. Okay, so as we play around with their values, I may change some of these things up just to get something looking good. Our next step is to create the vignette. So right now, I'm going to add another layer. I'm going to change this layer to black, and I'm going to fill that layer up. Okay, I'm not wasting everything that I've done here. I'm going to if I would like, if you want, you can kind of make that a multiply and lower the opacity down quite a bit there just to see what you're doing here. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that black layer and add a mask to it, which is this guy right here, just a little square with the circle in the middle of it, which is your mask. I'm going to right click, or just click on my paint bucket, right click. Normally it might be a gradient tool. If you can't find that paint bucket, it might be a gradient tool that you might just need to right click and find. But I'm going to change it back to gradient. By default, you may be at black and white, or whatever two colors you have picked down here in the swatches. You'll want to change that to black, from black to transparent. Okay. So right now I'm black and transparent, and I want to change the way that I'm building out my gradients. Right now I'm set to linear, which is just a line. We probably will use that later on in this tutorial. Right now I want to change it to radial. So from here I have a black radial mask. If I click in the middle of my scene and drag it all the way out here, I should be getting something like this right here. And I can increase my opacity here to make it a little bit more visible. There we go. And with that black to opacity map there, I can kind of tweak this, build up this mask a little bit. Oh, sorry, I'm not painting in the mask anymore. There we go. So we can do a couple of those gradials to really build up that detail. Alright, so now I have a vignette on my scene here, in my background image. Now I can kind of play around with my values even more. Maybe lower the opacity down on this map here, that kind of thing. But really just getting a good integration with that environment there. Okay, so my next step is obviously the contact information now. Maybe lower my opacity a little bit on the vignette. So right now I need to come over to my characters tool, which is this guy right here, or horizontal type tool. If you need to, I would also recommend coming over to your window and finding character and clicking on that. That should give me a little side menu over here that should allow me to have a little bit more control over my fonts and my typing tools. So if I type in here, I should have a character tool open. Take a look at what fonts are there. You have little samples here in the fonts to let you know what we're working with. Please do try to pick something legible, something that's professional. Nothing too crazy. So I think Impact will work for this one. Make sure that we have a good font size. If I need to, I'm just going to type in something easy here. Joe Schmo. And then, maybe do an enter and type in Joe Schmo at hotmail.com. This is all just a joke, but you get it. Okay, so I have a font here. It's probably, it might be a good size for right now. We'll play around with it. If you need to, you can kind of envision how your asset's going to work and what kind of angle you want to be using for that asset. But I'm going to leave this here right now. You have some other options here like bold and underline. You need to make sure you highlight what you're typing and then, press on these buttons, and that should adjust things. A couple of other options here just to adjust the size. Should I need maybe like a 72 font, you can kind of change things there. Let's say, for instance, I only want the name to be bold and to have an underline, and the website or my email address to have, a smaller presentation there. So you could change the size of this as well. Let's say, for instance, I like the name to be 72, but I want this one to be 60, something smaller. You can do that. We have some naming options or some color options up here too. White might look better. You never know. So I've changed my color to white here. There we go. I think that looks a lot nicer and it's a little bit more legible. So I'm going to go with that. We can always change things later on down the road. So Positioning is going to be a big thing this month. I'm going to do something real quick right here. Let's just paint a pistol. This is just for reference here. But let's just say, for instance, that I have a pistol that I want to show off a specific way. Okay, let's say I really like this angle on this pistol here. It's the best pistol I've ever made. Um, and I like the angle of this one, but there's something wrong here. I'm restricting how large this pistol can get in my view just because my name is here and I don't want to cover that up. So you want to take advantage of this. If you really do like that view better, make sure you zoom that information in, but you will need to relocate your name to another part of your canvas that supports that. So if I really want this pistol to, I'm going to scale this thing up just to kind of get more volume out of it. There, now I have much more of my canvas occupied by my asset, and I can move my name around. Now the name look here looks a little weird because it's a kind of offset now. You might have an alignment thing going on here, and you might have it set to maybe middle. You see how I have my alignment options over here, and you may want to shift that over to a left alignment so that we're kind of moved over here, and now it fits and kind of has a balance there for us. So okay, I have a naming convention there, which is good. My asset is fit well onto my scene. What I'm going to do now, and lastly, is the background banner, or the banner for my contact information. So I'm going to right click and make a new layer. I need to block out my banner, so get a good size on this thing. Change my gradient back to a paint bucket with the right click, and let's paint that black again. Okay. Control or Command D for a deselect. Now I have a banner back there, but it's it's pretty bold, it's pretty intense. I'm going to lower the opacity down just a little bit to get some see-throughness. See through it, gets just a little bit of value in there. It's still pretty sharp though, and it's pretty in my face. So I'm going to play around with this thing. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to click on the layer, and I'm going to do another filter, but this one's going to be a blur, and I'm going to choose Gaussian blur. With that option there, I can give my Gaussian blur a little bit of a radius, and you kind of see how it's fading the corners and giving me just a blurrier presentation there. All right, so maybe something like 9 might work for me. And then from here, I still do have that corner there, which seems a little odd to me still. So what I like to do is create another mask, and I'm going to blur that corner even more. So the way that I want to do that is go back to my gradient tool, change that gradient from the radial that we had before to linear again. This will be a straight line. And if I choose this area right here and drag it, I can create a gradient that's linear. You can kind of see the mask right here. So I have that mask gradient that kind of fades my model, or fades my contact information banner back there. So that's kind of how we're working here with this. I mean, from here on out, I can kind of play around with my values. If I want to change my color, I can. I can just, if I go to my layer and I use my little color picker, take my mask off so I can see what colors I have. Hey, that's the color I did have before. I don't like that color. Maybe I want to go a little bit lighter now. Go back to my paint bucket and fill it in lighter. Okay, so you have some customization now. You can move your banner around. You can move your contact information around. Change the name or change the lettering of it. You have full customization of this Photoshop file. Do keep in mind your safe action topics and your safe action principles here by making sure that nothing crops off the screen. If this was going to be seen on a square monitor, you might get things that are cropped off. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your models and playing around with that information. Okay, and that about wraps up what I have to say here. From here, you're just gonna save the model as, and I recommend a PNG. But most likely, Sketchfab is going to translate it as a JPEG and transform it into a JPEG just so it shows up on Sketchfab properly. But PNG is what I recommend, and just save it out. And you should have the import options right there in the Sketchfab lecture that I showed you earlier. Uh, and lecture 3 down on the list there. With that in mind, please let me know if you have any questions, and I will add any amendments to this lecture in writing down below should you need, or should things change or need any kind of revision for this lecture. Thanks again, and I'll see you around and see your models here on Sketchfab.